It's the 2nd of November 2008 at the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pace Interlagos in Sao Paulo, Brazil. It's the 18th and the final race of the 2008 Formula One season. It's the last corner of the last lap, and we all know what happens next. But the 100,000 fans sitting in the grandstand don't. Neither do the drivers. And the entire landscape of Formula One will change forever in this one corner. But to really feel the weight of what happens next, let's take a second look. 2008 season was remarkable for several reasons as new technical rules banned traction control and launch control, and the use of a spare car was restricted, and teams were not allowed to have drivers change cars unless their car had been massively damaged in a crash and it was no longer usable. It was also the last Formula One season to race with grooved tyres by Bridgestone, used since 1998 before slick tyres returned to Formula One in 2009. Rules for qualifying were also changed, wherein minimum lap times were instated and the elimination of the 5 lowest qualified drivers in Q1 and Q2 were created, which continues till this day. It was also the first time in the history of Formula One that all teams used the same 2 drivers throughout the season. Changes also happened with the Spiker team being bought by Indian businessman Vijay Mallya in 2007 and being rebranded as Force India, only a year removed from the team itself being bought from Midlands by Spiker. Adrian Sutil and Giancarlo Fisichella were named as the 2 drivers. Super Aguri pulled out after 4 rounds, citing financial issues, and it was also the last season for the Honda team before they pulled out of F1 later in December due to the global economic crisis. The changes included 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso, who left McLaren after a single season to rejoin Renault. Fisichella's place at Renault was taken by the team's test driver Nelson Piquet Jr., son of 3-time world drivers champion Nelson Piquet. Alonso was replaced at McLaren by Heikki Kovalainen, who had replaced him at Renault the previous season. Giancarlo Fisichella, Renault's other driver from 2007, moved to the newly renamed Force India team in place of erstwhile Spiker driver Sakon Yamamoto. After an unsuccessful test for Force India in December 2007, Ralf Schumacher left Toyota to drive in the DTM series, with 2007 GP2 champion Timo Glock returning to Formula One in place of Schumacher. Sebastian Bourdais, who won his 4th consecutive Champ Car title in 2007, joined Toro Rosso in 2008. The rest of the lineup remained unchanged. 11 teams started off at the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne, although Super Aguri pulled out after 4 races. At the first race of 2008 at Melbourne, there were 13 retirements from the race, including championship favourites Felipe Massa, Sebastian Vettel and Robert Kubica. Hamilton took first, followed by Nick Heidfeld in second and Nico Rosberg in third. Rubens Barrichello was disqualified following an unsafe pit release. A grid penalty for impeding drivers and a pit stop mishap left Hamilton in 5th place at Malaysia, while Raikkonen took his 16th career victory after he qualified in the 2nd position. BMW Sauber's Robert Kubica finished 2nd for the first time, with McLaren's Heikki Kovalainen 3rd. Hamilton qualified 3rd at Bahrain despite a crash, with Kubica taking his first pole position. Massa won the race with teammate Raikkonen in 2nd. Kubica made it onto the podium while Hamilton had a bad race, finishing 13th. He was back in the points at Barcelona, while Raikkonen took Ferrari's 3rd consecutive victory. Massa took the pole and won for the 3rd successive Istanbul race. At Monaco, Ferrari locked out the front row with Massa on pole, but on a bad day for Ferrari, with Raikkonen ruining what could have been Sutil's chance to score, Hamilton won the race despite a mid-race barrier scrape causing him a puncture. Kubica finished 2nd and Massa was 3rd. Hamilton was on pole position at Montreal for the first time since the beginning of the season, a drought of 5 races. However, a pit lane mishap involving himself and Raikkonen eliminated both drivers from the race. Kubica won for the first time with teammate Heidfeld 2nd. Raikkonen started the French Grand Prix on pole, but exhaust problems allowed teammate Massa to get the better of him as he took his 3rd season victory. Hamilton won back-to-back at Silverstone and Hockenheim, and Kovalainen took advantage of Massa's engine failure to take his first career victory at Hungary. New Valencia Street Circuit was the host for the European Grand Prix, with Massa taking pole and winning with Hamilton second. At Belgium, Hamilton qualified on pole and finished first, though he received a 25-second penalty for gaining an advantage during a scrap with Raikkonen. Massa was therefore classified as the winner. Toro Rosso driver Sebastian Vettel became the youngest pole sitter and victor after a stunning weekend at Monza. The race saw a downfall for the big teams as Felipe Massa and Lewis Hamilton finished 6th and 7th respectively. Heikki Kovalainen and Robert Kubica rounded off the podium. Singapore hosted its first ever F1 race and F1's first ever night race, taking place at the Marina Bay Street Circuit. Massa qualified on pole, however the race was to be a major blow to his championship. On lap 12, while Massa was leading, Renault driver Nelson Piquet Jr. purposely crashed, assisting teammate Fernando Alonso, who went on to win. He was victorious from a fuel feed problem in Q2, leaving him 15th on the grid, though he still out-qualified Piquet Jr. Massa was leading ahead of Hamilton, however, when he pitted for the safety car, his fuel hose remained attached, meaning the pit crew had to run down the pit lane to detach it. This ruined Massa's race, putting him in last position. Rosberg finished on the podium for the second and the last time in 2008, while Hamilton gained 6 points for third place. Alonso won again at Japan with Kubica second. Hamilton started the race on pole, however, he was given a drive-through penalty for over-aggressive driving as he drove Raikkonen off the track. Shortly afterwards, he was knocked into a spin by Felipe Massa, sending him to the last place and unable to get back into the points. Massa himself collided with the Toro Rosso of Sebastian Bourdais. Bourdais was penalized after the race and demoted from 6th to 10th position, which prompted widespread criticism. Hamilton led the championship going into the Shanghai Grand Prix and started from pole position alongside Raikkonen on the first row. Massa began from third next to Fernando Alonso. Alonso was passed by Hamilton's teammate Heikki Kovalainen, however was able to regain the place midway through the first lap. Over the course of the race, Hamilton extended a considerable lead over the two Ferraris, with Massa passing Raikkonen with 7 laps remaining to improve his chances of surpassing Hamilton's points tally at the final race in Brazil. Going into Brazil, Hamilton led the Drivers' Championship with 94 points. Massa was second with 87 points, 7 points behind Hamilton. A maximum of 10 points were available for the final race, which meant that Massa could still win the title if Hamilton finished 6th place or lower. Otherwise, Hamilton would be champion. In the events of a points tie, Massa would win the championship on a countback, having more wins. At Interlagos, the conditions were interchangeable as minutes before the race began, there were heavy showers causing a delay of 10 minutes. Almost everyone changed from dry tyres into intermediates with the exception of Kubica, who pitted during the formation lap, meaning that he would start the race from pit lane. This would be David Coulthard's last race as he was due to retire at the end of the 2008 season. However, his race ended in very disappointing fashion as he was hit by Rosberg at turn 2 on lap 1 and collected Nakajima, damaging his suspension and forcing him to retire. The accidents of Coulthard and Piquet prompted the deployment of the safety car at the end of the first lap. The track conditions began to dry early on, causing all drivers to pit, and by lap 11 the first round of pit stops had been completed. Timo Glock was fueled so that he could complete the race without stopping again when he pitted on lap 36. Massa was the first of the championship frontrunners to pit, followed by Alonso, Hamilton and Raikkonen. Massa regained the lead ahead of Alonso, while Raikkonen rejoined ahead of Hamilton in third place. Vettel made a pit stop again on lap 51, his team fueling him to the finish. He rejoined in 5th. By lap 54, Massa had extended his already comfortable lead over Alonso. Light rain began to fall again on lap 63, and Heidfeld made a pit stop, his team changing his tyres into intermediates, echoing their strategy at the Belgian Grand Prix, which granted the German a podium position. Kovalainen made a pit stop on lap 65. Hamilton and Vettel halted their battle for 4th position when they came into the pit lane to change into intermediates. Glock chose to remain out on his drive of the tyres. Massa made a pit stop on lap 67, meaning that all of the front runners with the exception of Glock were now on intermediate tyres. As rain began to fall heavily 2 laps from the end, Kubica unlapped himself, causing Hamilton to run wide, allowing Vettel to take 5th place. As Hamilton started his last lap, it felt like 2007 all over again, when Hamilton was within grasping distance of the Drivers' Championship but ran into a gravel trap on a routine pit stop in China, costing him the championship. Massa crossed the finish line to win the race and provisionally win the title with Alonso and Raikkonen as Hamilton continued to fight. But now, on the last corner of the last lap of the last race of the season, as all hopes of the championship slip away from Hamilton, he knows something has to happen. And it did. Welcome to a moment in time.
Is that Glock? Is that Glock going slowly?
It is, it's Glock! Oh my goodness me! Hamilton's back in position again! 100,000 local hearts sink in the grandstands. It's handed the place back to Hamilton. He comes through, and I'm absolutely right. I'm sure that he is going to claim 5th place, which is all he needs to do to become the 2008 Formula One World Champion, Lewis Hamilton.